to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. The Iranian regime is the leading state sponsor of terror.
In January 2018, US President Donald Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. The deal was aimed at preventing Iran from developing nuclear weapons. There was fear if Iran developed a nuclear weapon, it would cause Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates and other Gulf countries to build their own nuclear weapons, and that could be just the start of a deadly arms race in the Middle East. After acquiring office, Donald Trump imposed sanctions on Iran, and ever since, US-Iran relations have touched a new low. In the coming months, there were attacks on the US embassy in Baghdad by Iranian supporters. There was a missile attack on an American base in northern Iraq, just to name a few attacks on American interests in Iraq. And to top things off, the assassination of Major General Qasem Soleimani. Qasem Soleimani was in charge of Iran's Quds Force and was known to be the most powerful man in Iran. Iran has not yet retaliated, but has vowed to seek revenge. And if history suggests, then yes, Iran will attack. But what is the reason behind this dispute? Why have Iran and the US always been at loggerheads? Well, I'm your host Sid, and I'm going to take you through the events that have led to this dispute. But the first thing we need to do is go back and take a look at the history. It was only post-World War II that the US took an interest in Iran. The US, along with Britain, were interested in Iranian oil reserves and always maintained cordial relations with Iran, until the arrival of Mohammad Mossadegh. Mohammad Mossadegh was Iran's democratically elected prime minister. He was the first Iranian leader to limit foreign control over Iranian oil reserves. Mossadegh tried to resist foreign domination, and that's when in 1953, America's Central Intelligence Agency, along with Britain's M16, came and staged a coup in Iran and ousted Mossadegh from power. This proved to be a costly mistake, as Mossadegh was seen as a hero in the eyes of the Iranian people. It was a period where the Soviet Union were expanding their communist ideology, and communism is seen as a threat in the West. The Americans were interested in Iran's natural resources and at the same time afraid of Iran coming under Soviet influence, and hence put up a leader of their choice. A leader who would serve American interests in Iran. This leader was known as Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, and he was essentially a puppet who would cater to US interests in Iran. At the same time, an Islamic religious scholar known as Ruhollah Khomeini was in exile in neighboring Iraq. He believed Iran must be ruled by an Islamic doctrine, with Sharia law being implemented to govern the people, instead of Shahs being at the helm of the power. Khomeini had to reach his people, and therefore put his ideas down in books and tapes. These were then sold in markets across Iran. Khomeini was spreading his ideology deeply and widely across the country. He was slowly increasing the number of followers.
Ayatollah Khomeini.
The Iranian public were fed up and had enough, and that led to the Iranian Revolution. It is also known as the Islamic Revolution, as the Islamic Republic of Iran was in the process of being created. In January 1979, the economic, security and political situation had deteriorated to such an extent that the Shah fled Iran with his family, never to return. Ayatollah Khomeini seized the opportunity and returned to Iran. At Tehran, he was given a hero's welcome. Iranians saw hope, and he declared Iran an Islamic Republic 2 months after returning to the country. The Islamic Republic of Iran was the world's first democratically elected government under an Islamic theocracy. The US government, led by Jimmy Carter, was hopeful of achieving good diplomatic relations with Iran. Ayatollah Khomeini ordered the US to extradite the exiled Shah back to Iran to face trial. The US refused, and that led Iranian students vandalizing the US embassy in Tehran. The students took 66 diplomats hostage for more than a year. The students also termed the US embassy in Tehran as a den of espionage. Post this incident, the US cut off all diplomatic relations with Iran, never to restore them till date. Since then, the US and Iran have been at loggerheads directly or indirectly. Shortly after the revolution, Iran was at war with Iraq over a border dispute. The US, fearing Iran might take control of more oil reserves and expanding its influence towards the West, supported Saddam Hussein's government along with its allies. The US was concerned about Iran disrupting shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, deployed naval vessels to ensure smooth shipping in the region. One of these American vessels shot down an Iranian commercial aircraft. The US claimed they thought it was a fighter aircraft, but never apologized for the incident. Iran, on the other hand, have been accused of funding and training Shia militant organizations like Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and Hamas in Gaza. The US keeps a watch on Iran with the help of its ally Israel. Iran has also strained relations with US allies like Saudi Arabia and Israel. The US have expressed their concern of Iran's sphere of influence. Iran has a powerful proxy network that can attack US interests in Lebanon, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, and Qatar. The US and Iran are hungry for power, and they go to the extent of supporting rebel groups to overthrow governments, like exactly what's happening in Syria. Iran supports the Assad regime, while the US supports the rebels. Relations were their best during the Iran nuclear deal, but with Donald Trump in power, relations with Iran have fallen to a new low. With the US gradually withdrawing troops from Iraq, the balance of power in the region is going to shift drastically in Iran's favor. With already so much influence in neighboring Iraq, this could spiral out of control. Do you think Iran and the US will go to a full-fledged war? If you do, put it down in the comments. And if you like the content, please don't hesitate to subscribe and press the like button. Thank you and see you soon.